Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the next episode of Trading the Absurd with Sterling Studemeyer and Greg Cooper. Hope everybody is doing well. The last time we came to see you, we talked about the impending SpaceX IPO, and that is now come and gone, and we're watching the SpaceX trade off the way we figured they were going to do, pretty much based on the performance of lots of recent IPOs. So we're going to unpack that a little bit for you today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how SpaceX goes going forward. Our title is Trading the Absurd. This was clearly an absurd trade. And it was, well, we said as much. So it'd be very interesting to see how this continues to play out. I think we'll come back and revisit this topic more than a couple of times because there
Mhm.
are an awful lot of events in the future that are going to affect the price here. And I think that's one of the things we should spend a little time on today is sort of really talking about the events that are going to drive this. Because if you're thinking about investing or if you're already invested in this, you should be aware that these events will have a big impact. And you can also be sure that the professional traders in the street have all these events uh, calendared out, and they know exactly when they're coming, and they're going to trade accordingly. So, with that, let's go talk about SpaceX.
All righty. I'll go ahead and pull up the chart first, and we can kind of start with that. We'll take two different views of it. So let me screen share, and we are going to grab Optima first, and here we are. So obviously, here's the IPO day. Opened 150, low just a little bit below there, 149.34, and you had the high of 176.52. And then it ran up for the next 2 days. I mean, this was a big, strong, solid bar. The low is not too far off. The close, I mean, the open price and the high is just a little bit above the close. Thing that gets interesting is, we get up here into this top candle, and your open and your close are really close, but you've got this massive, massive range where it ran up and then it came right back down, and it's bounced a little bit and has come down again, even below. Currently, it looks like this would have been closed yesterday. Oh wait, no, this is showing today. Um, the market's still open for about another 42 minutes, so this would not absolutely be the low yet, but 145. 56 is what that's showing. And if we look at our point and figure, this is pretty ugly. You had the big run up and then two big long, down columns. The little bit up, the green column in the middle is going to correspond to what happened here and then down again. So it's looking pretty bad. And I will admit that I went ahead and I bought 100 shares of this at about 151 and change, just basically more as a buy and hold trade and a vote of confidence for Elon himself, more than anything to do with the current fundamentals of the company. So let's look at the live market here for a quick second, and I'm going to flip to Thinkorswim for
Well,
that.
and while you're digging that up, I would just point out that that big candle, really tall candle there, represents the probably one of the greatest torchings of retail investor capital in the history of mankind. Um, so if you look at that, there are so many people who bought in on the hype as it went up, I'm sure,
Yep.
and the retail only IPO structure really favored the institutions. Probably more than people think because the retail structure drove a lot of retail demand.
Yeah.
20% of the IPO went to retail, and only like 10% to hedge funds and 70% institutions. Do you think for a minute that those hedge funds were, playing this game by the same rules as the retail investors? I would argue the answer is clearly not. There are an awful lot of events ahead too, but if we really think about that, yeah, I would say it's the great fleecing of retail investors in a big way. And I'm kind of trying to figure out why it is that, Elon and crew would have wanted to do this with such a retail focus. And I'm thinking maybe they were just, you know, as my friend once said, who has the lowest expectation of return? The retail investor.
Yeah.
So let's hope that you were not a retail investor who got torched in this. A lot of over optimism, a lot of retail demand, a lot of short lockup periods, and just structural IPO mechanics all the way around with favored institutions and the index funds. So I think that retail investors, if they bought it on the IPO day and they were one of the first ones in, and then they sold at the 225 mark, they're pretty happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say that's a very small minority of those players. There's no way really to know right at the moment. But I think that we will know over time when they have to file the 13F. I think it's like 45 days out ish, something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
45 less, however many days have elapsed. And so, we'll see where that ends up. But the 13F data will give us some really good understanding of what the institutional holdings are, and therefore we can deduce what the retail holders are.
Yeah, something I'd like to point out on this chart, I've got volume on this chart that I didn't have on the other one. And this more recent, really since here, what day was this? 624. Volume's been really low. I mean, as you would expect out of the gate, it was really high, and then it's just gotten progressively lower. Popped up a little bit here, low, 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 low. Volume popped up a little here on this first of these last three down candles, but its volume has dropped, day by day since then. And, even though you've got decline here, it's on lower volume, which indicates that there's not a hell of a lot of conviction behind it. So it will be interesting to, obviously watching this is going to be fascinating to see what happens, much less watching what Elon actually does with the company and, what he's able to make happen with the capital that he's now got, from doing this IPO. So, I certainly hope he succeeds in, getting us to Mars and doing everything else that he wants to do. But here, just in the very short term, this decline on declining volume is not overly concerning from a technical point of view.
From a technical point of view, I would agree. If I go look at that on a fundamental basis, we all the things we talked about last time in terms of just sort of the structural issues with SpaceX, um,
Hmm.
and and things that are coming ahead. Of course, they keep propping that up with some great news, right? The roughly $1 billion a month agreement with Google, which I thought was pretty convenient, timing wise, right before the IPO. But
Yeah.
then other things that are going on. I think if I were playing in this stock right now, I would definitely be short, because I do think it's got some room to go down, especially with the events that lie ahead. So we're divergent on that one, but I think that's because you're uncharacteristically being a long-term investor on this one,
Yes.
and I would uncharacteristically be a short-term investor on this. I would really be hopefully an arbiter, because I really and truly just I think long run, sure, this company's going to be huge, going to be really valuable. So if you're buying it and you're going to ignore it and hold it, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you're probably pretty happy about your basis. If you're buying with the expectation that, you're going to trade this in the next 6 months, I would say there's some rocky road ahead. And, buy and hold, great. Buy and hold. I mean, you could argue now is a great time to buy it too, because it's at its IPO price. But if we go back and look historically at tech IPOs, I think we did talk about this last time, right? But the
We
percentage
did.
of them that are above water after 1 year or 2 years is relatively small.
Yeah.
So there's there's a big unknown here, though. That's the Elon factor. You bought this on the basis of your trust and faith in Elon being smarter than everybody else. Let's just hope he doesn't get hit by a bus or a rocket or whatever. But or maybe his jujitsu instructor could have hit him, and then he'd end up like you with a black eye, and he'd be, yeah, he'd be showing off a shiner, but he'd still be there. So, I mean, there's no question that he's brilliant. There's no question he's really good at this. But I do think that in this one, there was an awful lot of financial engineering going on behind the scenes. And, that enriched the insiders, I'm sure, in a big way.
Oh,
So,
of course.
yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of stuff in social media about how Elon created, lots and lots of millionaires with this IPO. So I think he,
yeah.
must have given stock to everybody in the company. So I'm sure they're all tremendously happy about this. So
Well,
is
and their
what,
RSUs are going to start, their restricted stock units are going to start unlocking here relatively soon.
yeah, it is pretty quick.
Like mid-August, late August. And so it'll be interesting to see, they are going to be after the first Q2 earnings call. Um, and, then they're going to unlock a little bit of a time. I think like in 7% tranches uh, over the course of, I don't know, probably the balance of the year. I don't know how far out those go, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see too what the short interest is on the insiders in terms of the employee stock. You would think most of those guys would hold it forever, but this reminds me in the early days of Apple
Yeah.
when their stock just took off, and there were people who worked at Apple who got these T-shirts. I don't know if I've ever told you about this, but I did a lot of work in the tech industry for a long time. And a lot of IPOs, a lot of tech people making big money on the inside. And they had these T-shirts that said FYIV, fuck you, I'm vested. And if you asked them to do something, they would just kind of point at the shirt like, no, fuck you, I'm vested. I don't have to do anything. I'm already rich. I work here for fun. I mean, like that was the attitude that they had. Now, granted, they were sharp people and they were doing great things.
Right.
And I think the same is true with SpaceX. But it is going to be interesting to watch all these millionaires. I did hear that there were an awful lot of places like in Florida and
Oh no, you froze.
other things.
Okay, you froze there for a second. You heard there was an awful
Oh,
lot of people in Florida.
Florida and Texas talking about how these SpaceX folks were, these SpaceX insiders were showing up and buying big houses and big ticket items because suddenly they were rich.
Well, good on them.
Good on them. Yeah.
Good on them. That's brilliant. Um, let's go take a look real quick at what's going on in the prediction markets. In connection with this. I think there we are. Let's take this puppy up. It's all right. We got poly market up first. Um, we looked at both of these. It's like, I mean, one of the things they have here is, Tesla and SpaceX merging, having that officially announced in this case by December 31st, currently priced at 25% odds. SpaceX Starship Flight Test 13, 91% by August 31. You have a bunch of different things on here. Lots and lots and lots of things pertaining to very detailed, granular things. This is 35 markets here. Kalshi, uh, Kalshi shows 179 events, but I don't think that's all truly SpaceX. You get
Yeah.
down here, you got some that's like politics and, you know, who will be named in Epstein files released this year. Why the hell that's coming up when we search on SpaceX, I have no idea. But very similar. You've got, will SpaceX land anything successfully on Mars before 2030? Currently, yes, is only at 27%.
And as Elon likes to say, I want to die on Mars, just not on impact. So successfully landing is pretty important.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, gravity's less than on Earth, so that gives you a little bit of room for error.
True, but it depends on your current velocity. Um, Collision with an interstellar object at the kind of speed you're flying in space would be fatal. I think, no question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, very funny. But anyway, Here's another one. Oh, this is not specific to SpaceX, but Starship launches humans to Mars before 2030. Currently only at 15%. Um, so anyway, there's a lot going on there, and uh, very interesting just to see how all this stuff kind of will interact with what's already going on in, the normal stock market as well as the options market. Give me
Right.
just a second. I'm going to pull up the option chain as well. We should have looked at that
Yeah,
before.
and as we talked about this earlier, when I look at the option chain, um, I my bet is that there's more money behind the option chain than there is behind the poly markets, um, and that the people that are behind the option chain are more sophisticated investors, and they're also taking it a lot more seriously. In other words, on a per user basis, for lack of a better term, they are probably a lot more invested financially in those trades than the guy who put $5 down on SpaceX hitting Mars by 2030,
Sure, sure,
with or
sure.
without Elon in the ship.
Yeah, all right. Well, you don't have your open interest is pretty small here. Biggest one is for the um first expiration here, which is 10 days from now, 9 days from now, excuse me. For like 130 calls at 130, only 518 contracts outstanding. And as you go up, gets a lot skinnier.
It's a lot
Uh,
skinnier. Yeah.
let's look out to the end of the year and see kind of what we've got here. Not a whole lot there, but very interesting that you've got your two biggest numbers here, 127 contracts outstanding for December 18th at 120, and the next biggest one is like 175. So that is
Mm,
interesting. Um, interesting. So here in that 175 is one of the numbers that you had prediction market contracts on, and that's 54.23% implied volatility on that baby.
mm.
So very interesting. I gotta move us so I can look at the puts. Open interest on the puts. Puts pretty thin. Um, Here you got puts at 155 was the um, biggest amount of liquidity. 107. Everything else is tiny, tiny. Look at that. You have almost nothing out to December.
Yeah.
So fascinating. We've got some work to do around this to take a look. Let's look a year out just for fun. 150 a year out. Well, you got no volume. There is no volume, no open interest in these that far out. Everybody's playing short. So,
Yep. And that tells you a lot right there. If you look at the short interest being so high, um, again, I think those very sophisticated investors are expecting that the events ahead are going to probably lead to downside, pricing versus big upside. And they might be straddling this so that they can hedge their position, but I would argue that yeah, it's very unlikely in my mind that they're even doing that. I think they're just probably doing the shorts and expecting that they're not going to take it in the shorts.
counting on not being on the wrong end of another GameStop.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. The world's most irrational pricing event. Talk about trading the absurd. That was a truly absurd one.
That
Um,
was. That was.
I feel like there ought to be something that's sort of along the lines of poly market, but it's like I don't know, a gang market. Hey, let's create a gang of people to just go and take some absurd position and just start rocketing these sky, pump and dump kind of things. But I'm kind of amazed there's not like a crowdsourced method of creating a gang to do a pump and dump on a stock. I guess you could technically argue that's what Reddit became.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to say, I
but
thought that was called
yeah,
Reddit, but
yeah, I think that is kind of Reddit. Well, I tell you what, I'll share here and put up the timeline, if that makes sense,
Absolutely.
and we can kind of go through what the timeline looks like, because I think that these are going to be really key things to keep an eye on as we go forward.
Okay.
And, um,
Yes, allow. There we are.
so in terms of what we've got to on the timeline, we're going to share. Come on, let me share. Thank you. Um, so if I go look at sort of these price catalysts that are out there, I assume you can see that.
Not yet. It should
There you
pop.
go.
Now I got it.
Okay, cool. So I just kind of put together this list of the various things that are happened or happening, right? So June 12th was the first day of trading. It was interestingly, it was only up about 20% that day. The options started trading on the 16th, and we hit that max of 225. But the first big event I think that's coming is it just got added to the triple Q, right, for the Nasdaq index today, if I'm not mistaken. And so as a result of that, all the index funds are going to have to buy some shares, and I would expect that that's going to drive the price up just because there's going to be some demand. I mean, they got to spend capital to buy it.
This is what surprises me because I wonder if they're doing this I wonder if the index funds are buying this on dark pools because it's certainly not showing up in the price bar or in the volume that we just looked at on Thinkorswim. So
Yeah, good
if the
point.
Qs are buying today, we're not, I don't know, it's not
Well, they've
obvious.
got 30 days, right, to load up on this, and so I got to
Okay,
think that they're probably going to drip feed this so they don't drive the price higher.
sure.
Or dark pools, whatever. But I mean, I think that they're smart enough to know they shouldn't all on July 7 go buy the allocation that they're
All of
required to
it.
have in the index.
Right,
They got 30 days to comply.
right,
Um,
right.
and I would also argue maybe some of those guys are playing the option game too. Trying to figure out how they get those in there. I don't know if that's in their purview. I don't know if they're allowed to do that if they're an index fund. I don't think so. So
I
um,
don't know.
August 6th, we've got Q2 earnings in the first lockup release, which is 20% of it, plus another conditional 10% that can be, unlocked. So that's an interesting event because, the earnings are going to be ugly. There's no question about it. The revenue trend is going to look great, but the earnings are going to be ugly. And, if you read the prospectus of this or any other stock, you would never buy it anyway. If you believe what their prospectus told you, right? So,
Right.
but if you look at the actual earnings, I think a lot of people can be very surprised who didn't do that homework, and they just said, "Oh, it's SpaceX, it's Elon Musk. I'm going to buy it because I know it's going to go sky high." And then the earnings come out, and you start hearing that they lost all this money and they've got all this debt and blah 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 blah. So I do think that the float's going to increase some there because you're going to have these unlocks,
Hmm.
but at the same time you're going to have this bad news. There's no way it's not going to be bad news. The question is it going to be as bad as some people are predicting, or do they have some tricks up their sleeve? I don't know who SpaceX's CFO is. I should probably go look that one up, but I'm betting they're working overtime trying to find ways to mitigate anything there.
Right.
And deals like the one they did with Google help a lot. But I mean, even if Google paid them the first 2 billion, up front, that's going to help their cash position. But from a revenue standpoint, it's not going to have much of an impact. And relative to the amount of debt they've got, yeah, probably not. I'm just trying to figure out how it is they have enough AI chips already up and running that Google, who has an awful lot of AI chips up and running, is
Yeah.
willing to pay them $1 billion a month for access to that chipset. You would think for $1 billion a month, they could just go to NVIDIA and wave that cash in front of them and say, send everything our way instead of somebody else. Yeah, that would be my approach. So anyway, it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. Then we got, after that, you're going to start seeing the employee unlocks we talked about.
Right.
And, there's three tranches that are planned at 7% each. So that's 21% of the employee stock. So that's going to increase the float as well. And, those are going to be selling events when those employees sell. So that's going to have downward pressure on the price. Or, if they if they're smart and they don't take advantage of that. But they don't get anything until after that earnings call, and they don't get another earnings call before that comes available. So I think that some of them are going to sell just because they bought that house in Texas or Florida and they got to come up with the down payment, so they're going to sell some of it.
Yeah.
Q3 earnings coming up in October. I think that's going to be the largest single event in this whole thing. About 28% of the locked shares are going to be released immediately following that. Pretty traditional approach. Um, but there's also, you get this big increase in potential supply. I think you will see that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the earnings are going to get any better. If anything, they might get worse. It just depends on kind of what's going on. So that's probably the highest conviction put target. Is hey, this is where I know that things are going to be ugly because we're going to have all this supply out there in the market, and we're going to have this bad news, and I think that's going to start driving this thing down. Then you got two more employee unlocks, so that would put us at what, 21 and 14. So that's going to put us about 35% of employee stuff. And then the full standard lockup is going to expire in December. And that's when you're going to have this big jump, I think, in supply. Because all of these C shares are going to free up, all the rest of the employee shares are going to free up. It will be interesting to see if in mid 27 they end up in the S&P 500. I don't think they will because I don't think they'll be profitable. I just don't see that they're going to be profitable by then. And the last point on here, which is really interesting note, Elon Musk has 6.4 billion shares of this stock. And you and I were talking before the call. I don't know about you, but I would take 6.4 billion shares in any company that was publicly listed and not in the pink sheets already.
Yeah.
Because even at $1 a share, well, that's $6.4 billion. I have a few things I could do with that. So, I don't think that Musk's going to sell much of this anyway. So I don't think that that's a big issue on the float side. And I don't think he really pays attention, to be really honest with you, about a lot of these stock prices and these events because to him it doesn't matter. I mean, he's got so many shares, he's got so much money out there. It's like if you make $500,000 a year and somebody charges you $5 extra on a $20 ticket, you don't really care.
Yeah.
You might care on principle, but from a financial standpoint, not have much of an impact on you. If you're struggling to get by and somebody does that, you're going to fight hard. I don't think Elon's going to fight hard. I don't think he's going to sell many of these shares, if any. He's just going to, slap a collar on him and borrow money against him like he always does and do whatever he wants, which for him, oddly enough, is work. That seems to be all he wants to do. So, work and father children. I guess isn't really work, but it doesn't strike me that that's a big time, component for him. I think it's
Father
just,
children?
yeah, I think he just kind of, goes in, fathers a child, and then he's kind of done. Doesn't marry any of them. He doesn't date any of them. So for him, I mean, hell, he wouldn't even have to be there. He could just use artificial insemination. So it's very interesting to see that, he does that, but he doesn't seem to have any interest in dating. You don't see him on the red carpet anywhere with, some beautiful woman on his arm. So, I think he really just wants to work, and that's a good thing for the
Yeah.
people on the stock. Just like it
Yeah.
was a good thing at Tesla, just like it was a good thing, in anything he's done back in eBay days, or PayPal, excuse me. So I do think that long term, your position is probably a really good one, and who knows, maybe you got it at the bargain basement price of all time. Even if it went from 150 down to 135, but then ultimately it ends up at 300 and something, who cares?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I just,
you got a great basis. So, but anyway, those are kind of the events ahead. And if you're thinking about buying the stock, you should probably put these in your calendar. And we should sort of chart out what happens to the stock price over time vis-a-vis this calendar because it'd be interesting to see how much of an impact they have. But I really and truly don't think we're going to see any earnings out of this company for at least a year, probably more like 2 or 3. Um, I don't know
yeah.
how it took Amazon to get to profitability. Do you remember? It was a long
No,
time.
I don't, but I do remember when I was in grad school in like 98, 99. How my professors at the time were laughing at Amazon, which had no earnings. And it's like,
Yep. Yep.
um, we see how that has played out. So,
Oh yeah.
For somebody doing something truly revolutionary to be, burning cash to build the business and grow the business. I mean, it can work. I mean, it's worked in the past with Amazon, and I'm sure there were plenty of others, but um, you know, not. And we've also talked a little bit about some of the magic or some of the legerdemain that takes place when it comes to financials in the first place. So I I have
Yeah.
not looked into, SpaceX's filings or anything. I will admit that. I tend to be more of a pure quant tech guy than I am
Mm.
any sort of a fundamentalist guy, even though I've got that training through the CFA program, but I just have not used it through my career. It's like at one
Well,
time
I
I
mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, outside of the pros, how
yeah,
many retail investors are really looking at things from a true value standpoint? I mean, I wish we had an audience of retail investors here we could ask some questions of, like, okay, raise your hand if you've ever read a 10Q, you know,
yeah,
and okay, keep your hand up if you understood it. Uh, you know, and so I think that's, raise your hand if you ever read a prospectus. I mean,
keep, keep your
or
hand
an
up if you ever
S1,
stayed
right?
awake while reading
Yeah,
one.
yeah, right. Read an S1, read a 10K, read a 10Q, and then go and okay, you read the 10K or you read the 10Q, great. How many of you then cross-referenced all the footnotes back to the financials? I'm going to say that's even smaller population,
Right.
and that's where all the damage is done, is in the damn footnotes. It's like, well, we assume this. You can assume anything. That's the old joke about the economist, right? You got the three guys in the lifeboat from the ship that's sinking, and they're trying to figure out how to get to shore. And the mechanical engineer says, well, if we could, one person jumps out and they flap their feet, that'll create thrust and we can go forward. And the another engineer says, well, what we could do is we could all take our shirts off and kind of, figure out how to tie them together and hold them up and make a sail. And then we could, ride the wind to the shore. And the economist says, well, assume a paddle. Now we just paddle to the shore and everything's fine, right? So, if you're an economist, you just assume away anything you don't want to deal with. And that's great. Financials and quarterly filing statements and annual filing kind of do the same thing. They have to reveal it, but they can also just assume it away, and they often do.
Yeah.
So, I think that the reality here, though, is that SpaceX has the first mover advantage. Their competitors have proven to be less than capable. Blue Origin, it seems to me like mostly an embarrassment. Phallic shaped rockets, sending girls into space just for a girls' day out. I mean, they don't feel like serious players in this, and they certainly aren't progressing at the speed of SpaceX. SpaceX has got world-beating firsts.
Yeah.
Bringing rockets back and reusing them, starting with that, and then catching the damn thing on the tower. They just remarkable, the stuff they've done. And I read somewhere their success rate, despite the spectacular failures, is in the 99% range or something. So they are very successful. They're very thorough. They're very detailed. Um, I'm looking forward to, and I'm sure we will have a day when there are going to be a whole bunch of SpaceX mafiosos who go out and create other companies, just like the PayPal mafia, including Elon, going out and create other companies. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably a long way away, 2, 3 years from now. That might be the bigger opportunity, is to figure out the people who actually made all this stuff happen in SpaceX and go buy their stock.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
they're probably going to be far less valued than this, because Elon's got the track record and everybody's excited about him. Well, maybe not everybody. There are a lot of
You
people who don't like him, but you know what I mean.
you make a great point. It would be worth getting on LinkedIn and like following all those people that work there now. So when they leave and go somewhere else, you can take advantage of those
Yeah,
opportunities.
it'll certainly be a calling card.
Yeah, it will be.
Um, Although, it's interesting. I hear this ad all the time on the radio from this guy who says, he's talking about, like, just emotional issues, and do you feel like this? Do you feel like that? And then he says, "Hi, I'm blah blah blah, former NASA engineer. You're not broken." I'm like, NASA engineer is going to help me with mental health. Wait a minute. That doesn't compute, like I don't get it. So I think though with these folks, almost anything they're going to do, and especially the people who have been dealing with it on the financial side of this, you do wonder how much financial and fiscal discipline there really is in that organization. I got to think there's a lot, but who knows?
Yeah. Um, I don't think that's something we're going to know for a while. I mean, you would think that Elon runs a completely tight ship based on everything that his engineers have been able to make happen. But, we've both worked in large companies, and, success in one area does not imply success in all areas.
True, but I think that they have enough clarity of their mission
Yeah.
at this point in time, right, to have everybody marching to the same drummer, moving in the same direction for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, as big as the organization may be, it's pretty clear when they're successful and when they're not to everybody in the whole world.
Yeah.
So
It's
I
very,
think
very
that
public.
yeah, it's very public, and I got to think, even if you're the guy who's the chef who's preparing the meals for the people who are working 24 hours a day, a rocket comes back down and crashes, you probably feel just as bad about that as the engineer who was sitting at the control panel. So,
Yeah.
I think they are in those early days, and that really is very, very helpful right now. One
Yeah.
day they'll become AT&T, and it'll just be this Byzantine empire of God knows what.
Right.
Um, but
Right. Right.
they're
Like,
still a long way away from that. I mean, look at Tesla. I don't even know what Tesla is anymore. I think that they're a robotics company now, and they're going to be focusing on humanoid robots, which is interesting because I have several uses for them, not the least of which is going out and doing yard work. Which I keep like I look at that. It's like for what it costs you to hire somebody to come cut your grass, which I've eliminated. I went and bought a Segway Navimo, and I got a robot out there cutting the lawn. But I still have to. Yeah, I'm a tech guy at the heart, right? And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to pay somebody. I mean, the payback on that is like, in my mind, less than a year. That is the simplest math ever. What you probably got to factor into it is how much time goes into setup. But for me, that's kind of fun. So I just see that as entertainment value. But the things that it doesn't do the edging, it doesn't do the weed eating stuff. Okay, great. So somebody please go invent that. You know, Either make me a robot that will go out there and do it, or a humanoid robot that'll actually carry the weed eater, or get me another machine that will go do that, so I don't have to. But when it's 96 degrees and 85% humidity outside, I have no interest in going outside and doing that. You know, um,
well,
so maybe that's what Tesla will come up with. We'll see.
yeah. Or maybe you just need to convince your HOA that like lawn standards should only apply like, from fall through spring.
Yeah, when everything's dormant. Yeah, HOAs. I have a lot of experience with HOAs, as you know, and I once
We'll
had
have to
11
do another
HOAs.
episode on HOAs, but
Oh
not to muddy
yes,
the waters.
the HOA sucks. Being a management company is a beautiful business model, so we
Yeah.
should talk about that. But yeah, I had 11 HOAs and 70,000 members, and I hate HOAs. HOAs are communism. The Politburo are the people that you elect as a board, and after that, your fate is in their hands. So it is a ridiculous mechanism, but at the same time, it's kind of like Churchill's quote. Socialism or capitalism is the very worst system of government, except for all the others. So it serves its purpose. So I do think though that with SpaceX they're going to continue to grow the revenue side. Right now the home run is Starlink, and given that AT&T went out on me twice, and including partially during this particular session, I'm starting to look at Starlink pretty seriously as a solution, even though I don't need it for mobility or any of those kinds of reasons. It's just looking like a better answer. I do
Hmm,
worry though about just how many satellites we have orbiting the Earth right now. We got a lot of space junk out there, so
we do.
I'm waiting for Elon to come up with a company that cleans up space junk. Seems like a logical extension, doesn't it? I mean, he's the one putting a lot of the junk up there, so you should know how to take it all down. For all we know, he's embedding a chip in all these things that would allow him to go find them and identify them and just drag them back out of space. That would have been brilliant. Planned obsolescence, right there. We're going to put a chip in every Starlink satellite, and then when it's time for it to go, we're going to have it. We're going to charge somebody to take it out of orbit, and all we're going to do is tell it to fire this retro and push itself to Earth and burn up in the atmosphere. Who knows? You know.
Well, you could, or you could, collect that stuff up there, far enough out in orbit that maybe eventually you can, I don't know, reuse some of it to build whatever the next thing is, whether it's a space station or, bigger ship that needs to be built in orbit or something of that nature. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily want to burn it all up. I mean, you've already spent the money and the effort to get it up there. If there's some way to collect it in one place and make use of it, it seems like that would be a better choice. I don't know how viable that is, and I'm just kind of, uh, speculating here.
Yeah, I would be very interesting to see. It will be very interesting to see how that works. I kind of doubt though that they're really going to be able to. I mean, you think about the resources that it takes to convert, whatever is in that satellite to the metal that they need.
Hmm.
That's I don't know. That strikes me as something that's be hard to do. But then there's Terrafab, right? And
Yeah.
then there's the whole idea of building a chip factory, a fab in space. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of advantages of that in terms of being zero gravity and yeah,
Well, I mean, we're both finance guys. We're not engineers, so we are not going to have the answer to these particular questions, I don't think.
that's probably true. That's probably
Yeah,
true. But we want to find the ones who do so we can invest in them and make money on it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there we are.
Look at that. Isn't that a little frightening? That's an awful lot of stuff up there.
That is. That's a
you know, and
mess.
you drill in a little more. Yeah, it's funny when you get closer, it doesn't look so bad.
Yeah.
But boy, I would hate to be, I mean, just one collision and it's all over for whoever is in that collision. Got an
Yeah.
awful lot of satellites up there. So, um,
Yeah. I guess you got to be careful when you're leaving the gravity well. I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
oh yeah. Um, what was that movie from way back when where they had the Ark kind of cruise ship of humans going through and just getting out of the Earth's atmosphere? They had to crash through all that. Wally, maybe I think that might have been it. I don't
Oh
remember, but
crap. I don't know.
Yeah, and they had to like go crash through all these satellites to get out of there. So,
Huh.
it's gonna be like New York pretty soon. You're gonna have a bumper on your satellite, that so somebody runs into you.
You're gonna have to parallel park your satellite.
Yeah, that would be fun, wouldn't it? So
Yeah.
anyway, so that from my perspective, that's our review of what we found there. I think the it will be interesting to see how it unfolds going forward, and maybe we should make a Duke and Duke bet of $1 on whether it goes up or down from here. Of course, we have a place for that now. We could just go to call sheet, but uh, my prediction is I think it's going to probably go lower before it goes back up. How much lower, I don't know, but I would say, you know, at least 125. Might even go down to 100, but I would say there's a 70% probability it's going to 125 and maybe a 30% probability it gets all the way down to 100, but I don't think it gets much below that.
Hmm. I think I don't think it's gonna. I mean, even with the earnings announcement, that is imminent, and the unlocking of the restricted shares and whatnot, increasing supply. I don't think we go below 135. I think that's going to be offset by, the Qs and anybody else that's, tracking NASDAQ. I think that's going to be more than enough to offset that and prevent it from going below 135.
I would say from a valuation, as a valuation value investor kind of guy,
Hmm.
I'd say it can probably support a valuation of 125. Yeah, right now probably a sports evaluation of maybe 100, but I think it'll get to the point where it can support a valuation of 125. But you've got that massive growth, right? So if you look at the price to earnings to growth ratio, the PEG ratio, and if you look at, just technically, from a technical standpoint, technical investing standpoint, how Elon stuff's done, and then you got the Elon factor, which is God knows what that's worth.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's the closest thing we have to Tony Stark, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Or Midas, take your
Yeah.
pick.
Yeah,
Um,
well, right, 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 right. I don't
Kind of
know.
feels like it.
Midas's story didn't end all that well, so I'll stick with Tony Stark. Uh, back when those movies were still fun. Uh,
It'll be fun to see when Elon's flying around in a spacesuit like Iron Man.
yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well,
Send us your questions and your comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
yep,
Um, we'd love we'd especially love to hear what we forgot to mention, or more importantly, didn't know to mention. And if you've got perspective on this, we're all ears. We always love to hear divergent opinions, and ideally, we can take all those divergent opinions and figure out how to converge on reality and get to right answers, which is to me the most important thing is getting to the right answer.
absolutely. And just remember, it's, more important to be profitable than it is to be right. So, uh,
Yes.
so this has been another episode of Trading the Absurd. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you like what we're doing. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.
Thanks all.